Guys, tonight on the Hawk Zone, we got a pretty cool show. We've been talking off season now for quite a while. The draft's way in the rear view mirror, and it's sort of now becoming that lull period. But there's still so much to talk about because we keep bringing on these guys that have great insight and different opinions. But tonight's pretty cool. We got Garrett Greenley coming on. He has a channel called Football Analysis on YouTube, and he has a large following. He is nearing 200,000 subscribers on his channel. So he's got a pretty cool story, but he's here to break down the Seahawks offseason, the draft, the free agency, and how he kind of sees his team matching up to the rest of the division in the NFC West. So we're going to talk to Garrett about all that and a lot more coming up on the other side. But before that, guys, if you haven't done it yet, go down and subscribe to our channel, like the videos, share the video, and hit the bell so you're notified about future episodes. All that really helps out the channel, guys. So on the other side, Garrett Greenley.
So y'all can sit here and ask me all the questions y'all want to.
Don't you ever talk about
Man, let's go. It's go time, baby.
I'm just about that action, boss.
You ready to go get it. You just like to do it.
That's what it is.
Defense trying to do that. Pass is caught back in. Can't chase it. What a catch! Jackson Smith and
Are you kidding me?
Baldwin. Oh my goodness, he caught it.
This is the HawksZone Rundown with your hosts, Ryan and Bryce.
Guys, Garrett Greenley joins us on the show today. He's got a massive YouTube channel, Football Analysis. We are stoked to have him on the show. He talks everything NFL, but we got him over here talking Seahawks. So, Garrett, we appreciate you coming on here, man, and talking Hawks with us tonight.
Yeah, I appreciate you having me. I really like where the Seahawks are headed. I like a lot of what they did this offseason, and I've been a big Mike Macdonald fan dating back to his days in Baltimore, and I was really happy to see him become the next Seahawks head coach, and I like the foundation that he set in year one.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think everybody is happy with the direction of the coaching staff, and now with our new offensive coordinator, Clint Kubiak, coming in, it gives us a little more confidence as well. But, looking at the offseason, I know we're sort of in that lull period here. The draft's over and everything's kind of, now we're waiting for camp and all that stuff to get going. But, you look at the Seahawks overall this offseason with the draft and what Schneider did in the offseason. What kind of, letter grade, I guess, would you give him, or just your overall analysis of the offseason for the Hawks here?
It was really good. Now for the Seahawks draft specifically, I only gave out 3 A+. Seattle was one of them. I thought they had a tremendous draft overall. And when you talk about, building through the draft and supplementing through free agency, I thought Seattle did exactly that, pretty much by textbook definition. You trade DK Metcalf to the Steelers because you did not want to pay him an average of $32 million per year, knowing that Jackson Smith-Njigba's contract was going to come right behind that. And pretty quickly, you'd be looking at, 65, maybe even more, depending on what JSN's contract would be, because as we know, contracts go up every year. So pretty quickly, you'd be looking at, $65, $66 million just in 2 receivers. So to trade DK Metcalf a year prior to what would have been, the holdout and everything that would have transpired was a tremendous move. And then bringing in DeMarcus Lawrence was also a really good move to have a guy that can still play at a solid level. And the same thing applies to Cooper Kupp. I do hope that Cooper stays a little more healthy than he has over the past few years. It's kind of been his thing, is good when he's on the field, but hopefully he stays healthy. Hopefully he has another good year or two. And the draft specifically, I thought Seattle killed it really all throughout, not just with the first pick being Grey Zabel, but really all throughout the entire 2025 draft.
So Garrett, when you look at where Seattle was after obviously, last season, hiring Mike Macdonald, getting 10 wins out of it in a division that, with the 49ers and the Rams and the Cardinals all seem to have kind of gone through their own change. The 49ers look like they're going through this kind of soft rebuild, now giving Brock Purdy all this money. We look at the Rams and McVay and Stafford, and kind of they're still holding out hope that Stafford can play at an elite level. And the Cardinals are still, this team that's kind of a bit of an unknown, whether Kyler Murray can really put it all together and they can actually ascend to being one of these perennial contenders. Do you think this Seahawks offseason has allowed them to close the gap or even jump some of the teams that maybe they were a little bit behind last year when they'd made this change to Mike Macdonald and this new staff?
Absolutely. And the thing is by the way, I'll go over all the teams, but I do want to say that I think the NFC West is just because they don't have the Rams aren't exactly like the Jets or Giants where they're in the headlines every single week and, everybody's writing about what every player's doing. But the NFC West, I feel like doesn't get as much publicity as it should nationally. I really think it is the most complete division in football, top to bottom. AFC West would certainly give it a run for its money, and so would the NFC North. But the NFC West is just there's no bad team. You don't look at a team in this division and say, we're playing the Cardinals this week. We're playing the 49ers this week. Every team is a complete unit. And you can tell me right now that Seattle goes 4-2 in the division. They could go 2-4. Really, nothing would surprise me, but that doesn't apply to just Seattle. It applies to all of the teams in the division. Now, if I had to pick right now who I think will win the NFC West, there's a lot that could transpire between late May and early September. I do think the Rams would win the division, but I do think Seattle would be right behind them at second. But again, we're talking that, a play here, a play there in whenever they play. If it goes Seattle's way, then that could be the difference between finishing second and being a wild card team and hosting a playoff game at Lumen Field. But each team in this division is very good, and I wouldn't be surprised at all if all four teams win 9+ games and ultimately have over 500 records.
You look at the national guys, that have created the Hawks. And I know you say the NFC West doesn't get its cred. A lot of them have Seattle like taking a step back. You hear in 7 wins and all that, and actually giving some praise to the Niners and which is a little surprising as well. Do you think a lot of that has to do when you look at Seattle and, people just focus on the big names, and you had 2 of the biggest names on the team now exited in DK Metcalf and Geno Smith? Do you think that kind of plays a role where they're sort of giving the Hawks that line of wins there? Is that a factor for you?
In terms of the national media, absolutely, because it's, out with the old and okay, we're bringing in Sam Darnold. And unfortunately, with Darnold specifically, it's kind of, guess what? He didn't play well, and he saw ghosts in week 18 in the wild card round of the playoffs, which were the 2 biggest game of the year. So unfortunately for Seahawks fans, guess what narrative's going to follow him no matter what? We're not going to talk about the first 16 games in which he went 14-2 as a starter, in which he threw for 4,000 plus yards and 35 touchdowns in 16 games. We're conveniently not going to talk about that, but what we are going to talk about is a receiver that kind of wanted out to begin with. As I really think that if DK wanted to stay, he definitely could have worked something out. And Geno was a bit of a different situation just because he was aging and the roster, they went through a bit of a youth movement with the draft and everything, and with especially as many draft picks as they had. So that's a bit of a different situation, but I definitely think the national media is a lot lower on Seattle than what they should be, especially with what Bryce alluded to with how many positives there were to take away from year 1 of the Mike Macdonald era.
So just kind of looking at that Sam Darnold perspective of this, Garrett, you're a Vikings fan, so you got to see him for that entire stretch. And like you said, there's this narrative that he saw ghosts during those last 2 weeks of the season being the 2 biggest weeks. Do you think he's going to kind of do what a lot of this national narrative is? He's going to kind of come crashing back down to earth. And last year was this anomaly season. Or do you see it more being where, he may have a slight, statistical comeback where he's not throwing 35 touchdowns and 4,300 yards, but he's still a good to above average starter in the NFL. Do you think those last 2 weeks were more of a collaborative of Sam struggling, plus there being some issues with the O-line and the teams that they went up against? Or do you think it really was truly more Sam struggled, and that could be something we're looking to see going forward here in Seattle, where if Seattle doesn't get their O-line right, that's the quarterback we will see for the majority of the season?
I think it's a combination of all of that, to be honest with you, because there were plays in the year. There was one play that I referenced on another Seahawks podcast that I was on recently where you guys saw firsthand when Sam Darnold had to make a play 4 minutes left in the fourth quarter at Lumen Field. He found Justin Jefferson with the game on the line, hit a beauty of a throw. I mean, that was situationally one of the best throws of the 2024 season. Jefferson walks in for the touchdown, and that's effectively the game. So the whole narrative is unfortunate for Darnold specifically, but this was a guy that in the face of pressure all year long made throws. I mean, there was a play, and I'm going to specifically talk about a game back in week 2, but it was against the Niners, a team that he'll obviously see twice a year, where San Francisco was running a version of Tampa 2, and they had the tadpole running up back behind the receiver on the seam route, and Sam Darnold just threw it right behind, I want to say it was Fred Warner's ear, and just throws it right into the receiver's hands. And I saw that play, my jaw kind of dropped. I went back and watched it on the All-22, and I said at that point, we were 2-0 at the time, and I said, we have a guy. Now, the offensive line collapsing as much as it did was unfortunate. Sam collapsing was also unfortunate. But Cam Robinson, the Vikings left tackle last year, who they traded for after Christian Darrisaw unfortunately tore his ACL against the Rams earlier in the year, he allowed something along the lines of like 15 or 18 pressures in the final 2 games, which obviously is not discussed by the national media. It's way easier to say Sam Darnold goes, Sam Darnold bad, he stinks, and move on with that than talk about how bad Cam Robinson specifically was in the final 2 games of the year. Now, he was a solid player for a lot of the season, but it was more than just Sam Darnold having 2 stinkers in the 2 most important games of the year, unfortunately, for him and the Vikings. But the interior offensive line for Minnesota wasn't good last year. That, of course, also isn't discussed about. I mean, there's a reason that Minnesota went out and got 3 new starters along the interior offensive line, and it wasn't because they all retired from last year. So there's a lot that goes into it, and it was not all specifically on Darnold.
Yeah, you look at who, I talked to you before we went on here about the quarterback room and how as Seahawks fans, like, at least Bryce and I like the direction of this QB room. We think we can compete right now with Darnold. We haven't really lost anything there. We just got younger, reset the room, but also our 3rd round pick in Jalen Milroe, the future potentially is sitting right there too. What's your thoughts on Milroe as a quarterback and potentially as a starting quarterback for the future for the Seattle Seahawks?
So with Jalen Milroe specifically, I like the situation, and I don't just say that, oh, hey, we got a developmental quarterback. I like the situation, and you might actually hate the situation. No, I love it. Jalen Milroe is, to me, the perfect developmental guy to play behind Sam Darnold, because Darnold's contract is really friendly. I mean, it benefits both sides, because obviously Sam gets, generational wealth for him and his family. And if he unfortunately does become the ghost player that we saw in the final 2 weeks of the year and reverts back to Jets Sam Darnold, if you will, then the Seahawks are protected, because he's going to effectively be off the books after the 2026 season. Yes, there's, a little money and a little void years and all that, but he'll effectively, the majority will be off the books after the 2026 season. And when you sit back and ask the question, okay, are we not going to be able to pay a specific player because of the Sam Darnold contract? And the answer is, of course, no. So to be able to have both players and Jalen Milroe in a situation behind a guy in Sam Darnold, to me, is really beneficial for both players, because Jalen Milroe will obviously treat at least I would think, and his work ethic that has been noted points to him treating that, he's going to play every practice like it's, do or die, that he's the guy and that he's effectively going to be the guy. It's also going to push Sam Darnold to be even better. And I'm a fan of having a little bit of a competition in the quarterback room, and I think Jalen Milroe will absolutely provide that. But what Jalen Milroe will also provide is when you get into the deep red zone area, that 5 to 10 yard line, you can bring him in kind of as a not gadget player, but another quarterback that teams are going to have to deal with, because this is not going to be a Ricky Williams, Ronnie Brown Wildcat offense where, they might throw one pop pass to the tight end that you have to look out for. This is a legit player that started in the SEC last year, and he was a 3rd round pick for a reason. I will go ahead and preface that, but he's a guy that it has legit running back capability at the quarterback position. I mean, he ran for 20 touchdowns in the SEC last year. I am very excited for the idea of Jalen Milroe in the Seahawks offense this year and everything that Clint Kubiak can muster up with him.
Yeah, when I saw, the whole quarterback group this year come out and I did my deep dives into it, Jalen Milroe for me was exactly that. He was developmental. I never thought, hey, let this guy go in and be a starter somewhere. Like, that's not the right situation. That's how you burn through these quarterbacks, which, as you can see through, outside of last year's group, which that truly was a generational class, 6 quarterbacks going in the top 12 picks. That's the closest, I think, truly to the 1983 group that we all reference back to with Marino and Elway and all that. But when you looked at this year's group, it wasn't a situation of like the Kenny Pickett class where I went, yeah, there's some really bad quarterbacks that are going to get overdrafted in this. Like Jackson Dart, I think, is going to be a good NFL quarterback. Cam Ward's going to be a good NFL quarterback. Jalen Milroe, to me, is the one that was the wild card because if, the thing that everyone talks about with him is his passing, his intermediate, especially in short, and how there's all these issues with it. And when, for me, as a quarterback coach, and I watch the tape of Jalen Milroe, I go, okay, it's not upper body mechanics that are the issue here. We're talking about feet and eyes and getting them corrected. And that's something that Josh Allen struggled with coming out of Wyoming, which now everybody seems to forget about. When he came out, he had a lot of the same questions that Jalen Milroe was facing in this year's class, which were, hey, big arm, athletic, raw kid. Even in some respects, Milroe is a better athlete, but can't throw consistently intermediate short. And Josh struggled his first couple seasons there in Buffalo, figured it out, and now you look at the player you're getting. I'm not saying Jalen Milroe is going to be Josh Allen, but I'm saying the trajectory of the path to correcting the issues he has is attainable for that player if they put in the work. And I think in a Kubiak system where he's not going to have to make line protection calls, which is a big thing in this offense, and that's something Shanahan and them have built into it, it allows you to just go out, make reads, and play. And I think his ability to stress the edges of a defense with his second play on the first play type of thing is where you're going to see Jalen Milroe have early success when he does eventually start. But I don't expect him to start in Seattle until potentially 2027 for me.
Yeah, I mean, I love Jalen Milroe, and I think one thing that applies to Jalen, if and when he does start, and it definitely applies to Jaden Daniels, is NFC teams are not used to, and Lamar's a perfect example, because AFC teams, after dealing with it for the better part of a decade now, are getting close to a decade. AFC teams are not used to as simple as this or NFC teams, are not used to as simple as this idea is, just how much ground Lamar Jackson covers. You can have one passing play that goes on for 5.5 seconds. It might start at left hash. By the time Lamar drifts over, 27 yards across the field, I mean, your defensive linemen are gassed just at Lamar running half speed. And then by the time you factor in the plays that he actually runs back around and does the Lamar Jackson plays, and we saw Jaden Daniels do that quite a bit last year, NFC teams are not used to that because they don't have to play Lamar. And I think if Jalen Milroe does play, he could have a similar impact from a rushing standpoint that Jaden Daniels had last year, in which he nearly had 900 rushing yards and had 6 rushing touchdowns for the Commanders. So I really love the idea of bringing him along slowly and having him play in those 3rd and 1, 4th and even 4th and 1. Hey, you want to try something crazy on your side of the field, 4th and 1, go for it. Good luck stopping Jalen Milroe, and forcing opposing defensive coaches every single week to carve out time to game plan specifically against a player that you have no idea when he's going to be on the field. And I think there's a reality where Seattle uses him not in a tush-push style, but just the fact where it could be basically 1st and 9, the way that Philly has 1st and 9 every single drive over the past couple of years.
Just talking about the running game, sticking on that, you mentioned Milroe. You look at the Seahawks running game, especially last year with Ryan Grubb there, and just really no identity anywhere. You knew Mike wanted to be a run heavy offense, and we just never got an identity at all. You look at this room right now, obviously they went and drafted a back in Damian Martinez, and now that room's getting pretty deep. You still got Kenny McIntosh that does some cool things, and then obviously K9 and Charbonnet, also Halani is there. How do you like this room, and do you see the Seahawks getting back to a revival there? And how many backs do you see them carrying going into the season?
That last part is going to be the golden question, because Damian Martinez, I thought, was one of the biggest draft steals, and he was actually he also played into why I gave the Seahawks an A+ draft grade. I had him in my top 100. They drafted him at like pick 223, but there's a player the Seahawks drafted on day 3. Guys, help me out. It was the guy from Alabama that is going to be used in the fullback role. I'm not sure the name. I forget the name off the top.
Robbie Oots.
Yes, Oots. Yes, he's going to be using that in the fullback role. So I was really surprised. If there is one surprise takeaway from the Seahawks last year, and I know circumstances call for different things, but Seattle finishing 29th as a team in rushing attempts surprised me. That was one that I never would have thought would have happened if you would have told me a year ago. I would have believed the winning record. I would have believed a lot of things. But that was not one that I would have believed. So I definitely think that, especially you bring in Sam Darnold, you know the struggles that he had. You have, in my opinion, not one but two good backs in Kenneth Walker and Charbonnet. I absolutely love Charbonnet coming out of UCLA. I still think he's a really talented player. I don't think that talent has went anywhere. And then you draft Grey Zabel in the first round, who's certainly not like a Quentin Nelson road grader per se, but he's going to help out in the run game and ultimately help the Seahawks have a higher yards per carry this year than they did last. And ultimately, I do think the game plan is to run the ball a lot more than they did last year. And to give you a definitive answer on running backs that I think make the final 53, I feel like it would be 3 because of Oots having a roster spot and then having Damian Martinez on the practice squad. But I would then worry, I mean, this is like 3-4 months down the road. I would worry about a team potentially snagging him to put him there 53, but that's a late August, early September problem. But I would say 3 backs definitively make the roster, in my opinion.
So with this, change of scheme here, obviously last year with Ryan Grubb in Seattle, we all had high hopes based on the Washington offense that he ran. And the biggest thing for me that stood out was Seattle never seemed to have an identity running the ball, Garrett. They seemed to constantly be back and forth between whether they were going to be a gap duo power team versus whether they were going to be an outside zone run team. And it usually depended on who was the running back. K9 was usually they were running zone. Charbonnet's in there, they're running gap power. Do you think now with Clint Kubiak coming in and this entire staff that he has brought with him and an identity behind the staff, do you think that will actually help jumpstart Seattle's entire offense and especially their O-line play because they know what the identity of their run game is going to be?
I personally do, yes. And I'm a big believer or big proponent, big believer. Well, I'll just say big believer. I'm a big believer in having, 2 styles of backs on the same team. So I love the Kenneth Walker and Charbonnet duo. And I am with you that I think there will be a better identity with Seattle this year. And Anthony Bradford experiment hasn't exactly worked out the best for the Seahawks in the first couple of years of his career, and several other offensive linemen in 2024 for that matter too. But I do think that it's going to be one of Clint Kubiak's goals is to really establish the identity in the run game, and ultimately that'll be Mike Macdonald's one of his goals too. Because if we continue to pound the rock, our defense can stay fresh, and if the opposing offense isn't on the field, then they can't score. And another thing that I don't think is really discussed too much with Clint Kubiak specifically is there was a game last year, the Saints absolutely mauled the Cowboys in week 2, and Alvin Kamara had 4 touchdowns, and in the first 2 games scored 91 total points. They scored 47 points against the Panthers. They scored 44 points against the Cowboys in week 2. And I would expect those types of results every single week, obviously, but you saw what they were trying to do when they had consistent quarterback play. And then the Saints unfortunately had several injuries, and that really derailed their season. And they also had Dennis Allen as their coach. But if you go back and watch weeks 1 and 2 of last year of the Saints and everything that they tried and everything that they accomplished, I would like to think that those same, not policies, but those same concepts are applied and basically copy pasted the Seahawks 2025 relative to each player's strengths.
So, Garrett, looking at this entire Seahawks draft class, I know I watched your show with Dan. I know you gave it an A+. Outside of obviously, with the Grey Zabel pick and Emanwari and Arroyo and Milroe, what did you really like about the back half of Seattle's draft class here? Like Torrey Horton and all the way through to Damian Martinez there in the 7th round and Ricky White. Like, was it a top-heavy thing that got you to like Seattle's class so much, or was it the entirety of it, or was it more that ability of John Schneider to make key acquisitions in the later rounds?
It was, I would say, a combination, but the biggest thing that I liked was the value. Torrey Horton, to me, was a player selected at 166 overall. Guys, forget 165. I'd be hard-pressed to find 110 players in this class better than Torrey Horton. And to have that type of value, I mean, personally, I had him, I'm going to say it's spot 94 on my big board, and to have a plus, what is that, plus 72 value that early in the draft is incredible. And Torrey Horton, to me, is a guy that I think could be a wide receiver 3 towards the end of his rookie season. Maybe if Cooper goes down, which we of course hope doesn't happen, he steps up and he could eventually be a wide receiver 2 to Jackson Smith-Njigba's wide receiver 1. I really also like Damian Martinez. I mentioned earlier that I had him at spot 83 on my big board. They selected him at 223. And again, anytime you have a plus 140 value on the big board, I'm going to sign off in that selection no matter where it is. I mean, he is a really good back. I think he is kind of just in terms of playing style, that big bruising back. I really think he's kind of the blueprint of what Mike Macdonald would want, and I really hope he makes the final 53 man. The only thing I worry about is because he was a 7th round pick, is he going to be kind of discarded? But look, it was a plus 140 draft value. Absolutely love that for Seattle. And then they also signed in the UDFA period 2 of my players that I had in the top 150. So not only was the draft class good, but I also really like the UDFA class with bringing in Jared Ivey and a pass rusher from Ole Miss, and then a corner, Zy Alexander from LSU. Now, whether those guys make the roster or not, it's the idea that, we are bringing in high value players that could eventually make the 53 man. And I like Zy Alexander a lot. I thought he was he was a little slow on tape, but he was good in coverage. He covered SEC receivers all year long at a very high rate. And when you factor in the value that Seattle had in the draft and the UDFA period, there was a reason they were one of 3 teams to have an A+ draft grade. I thought it was a tremendous job all around by John Schneider and company.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And you look at the draft as a whole too, real offensive heavy. That offense is going to be obviously a whole new look and deal. On the defense, when you look at it, and obviously in the latter half of the year, we got down to what we expected to see from a Mike Macdonald defense. He started opening up his book a lot more, and 2 different linebackers in the second half of the year, just quick changes from Mike, right? He wasn't wasting any time. You look at it specifically, if you look at this defense, how do they get to be that, elite room? But I want to ask you real quick before that as a whole, what is your thoughts? Because we talked about sort of where they're a little thin. And we looked at cornerback and linebacker, right? One of your starters goes down linebacker, and we expect Tyrese Knight to keep going. Maybe he has a slump, right? But how do you like the cornerback room? What's your thoughts on Reek? He's got a big year coming up, contract wise. So are you concerned about a couple of those areas there?
So this doesn't apply to just Seattle. It applies to almost every team, but corner depth is, corner depth is going to be a problem if one, or especially if 2 guys go down. But that's you can literally copy and paste that for every team. But for Seattle to really, go from the good to great level on defense, health is going to be a big one, not just in the corner room, but Byron Murphy missed some time early last year, and there was a bit of a difference when he was out for the Seahawks. And he's another player that I think can really step up and really take that next level jump. We saw Nnamdi Madubuike do that for the Ravens in his final year under Mike Macdonald, and he was heavily compensated, and rightfully so. Now, for Tariq Woolen specifically, he's a player that, I think I got to word this here. He's a guy that I'm kind of glad he's not on my team. I'd let somebody else take the chance, if you will. But when he's on, he's on. But I know there's times where Seahawks fans get a little frustrated with his tackling, and I completely understand why. But Tariq is in a contract year. So if there's ever going to be a year where we get 2022 Tariq Woolen and he's going to step back up, maybe not the 6 interceptions part, but a guy who is causing havoc week in and week out, and you get that really above average to good level of play from him, it's going to be this year. So it's going to be consistency, and it's going to be health is what it boils down to most. And I hate to give that answer, but Seattle has the talent. It's just a matter of how many games can all of these guys play together. Because if it's 14 or 15 games where we have, 10 of the 11 starters playing, I'd be pretty surprised if we're not a top 10 or 12 unit.
So with this defense, Garrett, one of the things for me, or 2 of the concerns for me, is obviously the depth behind Ernest Jones and Tyrese Knight at off-ball linebacker. It's very thin at the current point. And the other thing for me is we don't really have a guy as an edge player. We've got a lot of what I would call B-plus guys. You got Boy Mafe, Derek Hall, Chenna Nwosu when he's healthy. But the thing that I feel for Seattle is they've got Leonard Williams. You can't bank on Leonard Williams having another year like he did last year. You're hoping, like you said, on Byron Murphy coming and stepping up and taking a role. And then you got Hankins and Jaron Reed in that middle as well, which are aging players in their own right. A lot of talk has been made in the Seahawk Twitter and everything about potentially going after Trey Hendrickson. Do you think the fact that Seattle doesn't have a, so-called guy on that edge group that really defenses will have to game plan will cause them any issues this year? And do you think it's something they could look to try and make an acquisition at now that they have an abundance of salary cap space? And then do you think Seattle will add some more depth or a veteran behind Ernest Jones and Tyrese Knight before the season starts?
So the easy question is yes. I'd be very surprised if they do not add depth. Just whether it's a camp body, whether it's a legit 30, 31-year-old player that's still unsigned. As to who that would be at this point, I don't have an idea off the top of my head, but I'd be very surprised if they don't add at least one or two players to bring in and at least see what they have. Now, for the premier pass rush part, I would agree on the Leonard Williams on that part. He had a tremendous year last year. I was really impressed by the year he had. I actually thought he was going to get paid, or I thought he was going to, have that after he gets paid rather, and then kind of just, all right, I got paid. I'm going to kind of not relax, but I'm going to do a little more than the bare minimum so I don't get cut type thing. You guys know what I'm referring to from veterans where anyway, but I was really impressed with him. Now, Byron Murphy was a player that I was huge on in the 2024 draft. And I've said with Byron Murphy, with Johnny Newton, with several defensive tackles that it takes them a bit of time to really, get adjusted to the NFL level, get adjusted to playing NFL competition week in and week out. We're not playing Alabama in week 2, and then we're playing Vanderbilt in week 3, and then, Alabama A&M in week 4, and then LSU in week 5, right? We're playing all of those on steroids, or the Alabama and LSU's on steroids every week, right? So I do think Byron Murphy takes a big step this year. I think Mike Macdonald, I think it was kind of a statement that he was Mike Macdonald's first draft pick as the head coach of the Seahawks, that he's going to be our version of Nnamdi Madubuike, and he's going to, be that guy that has maybe, 20, 30 pressures in year 1, and then maybe 40 or 50 in year 2, and then in year 3 and year 4, that he's going to be a consistent 60 to 65 pressure guy that has anywhere from 8 to 12 sacks per year. Obviously, sacks are a very varying statistic, but I really think Byron Murphy and Leonard Williams are a tremendous duo. And then you throw in all of the guys that you just mentioned, whether it's Boye Mafe, whether it's Uchenna Nwosu, whether it's DeMarcus Lawrence. I would like the addition of Trey Hendrickson. I'm not going to say, hey, a team shouldn't bring him in, especially a team that won 10 games last year and a team that is on the verge of potentially making a deep playoff run. But I think they'll be fine personally. It's not a spot that I panic. They had 5 guys with 45 plus pressures last year. McDonald's a tremendous defensive minded coach. I don't worry with Seattle the way I do with other teams, but I wouldn't be opposed to bringing in a guy that has back-to-back 17 plus sack seasons either.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Garrett, you look at this division. I know we sort of touched on it at the beginning of the show, but you look at looking at the overall division and the NFC West. I know you saying it doesn't get the credit it deserves, and it's tough from top to bottom. But just give us a little more in-depth breakdown of of each team that obviously we face them 2 times a year. That we can sort of dig into a little bit more.
Sure. So the 49ers, they're, like you said earlier, they're going through their own little bit of a retool just because they paid Brock Purdy and they can't have, everybody on the roster that they've had over the past couple of years. So what they did in the draft this year was basically say, hey, we don't want to get gashed in the run game the way we did last year. So we're going to overdraft a couple of players in Micah Williams and Alfred Collins, and I think they can be fine. But ultimately we are going to ensure that we don't go through a year like we did last year. And then they, of course, will also have Brandon Ayuk coming back off of a torn ACL. And I think with the 49ers and Ricky Pearsall entering year 2 for that matter as well, I think with the 49ers that they had a really rough year last year, not just from a result standpoint, but there was also not just one, but multiple things that happened off the field. Of course, Ricky Pearsall, that was the big one. And then one of the players on the team had a child, unfortunately, pass away. And there was a lot just of tragedy within the 2024 49ers season. And the play on the field also wasn't good. So I think they're a little underrated heading into the season, because I think that people think it's as simple as Brock Purdy paid 49ers are now bad. And I don't think that's the case. I think they're still going to be a really tough team. I still think they are going to be a team that wins, like we said, anywhere from 9 to 11, 12 games, maybe not 12, but 9 to 10 to 11 games, and is a thorn in a lot of teams' sides. And Kyle Shanahan's still a really good head coach. He didn't go anywhere the last I checked, so they're still going to be a really good team. Now with Arizona, they are a team to me that's kind of done everything right over the past couple of years from a process standpoint. They are building their team through the trenches. They are a lot of the time drafting good football players. They're not overthinking it. Whether it was Paris Johnson a couple of years ago, whether it was Marvin Harrison Jr., whether it was BJ Ojulari back in the 2023 second round, and then bringing in a guy like Josh Sweat in free agency this year, and then drafting Walter Nolan in the first round this year. To me, they're building their team the right way. It's more along the lines of, can everybody step up and can we cohesively play together as one and be that good team? Because I'm a big believer in both the Arizona Cardinals and Seattle Seahawks. And it wouldn't surprise me at all if either team makes the playoffs. I don't think both will, but I wouldn't be surprised if either makes the playoffs this year, especially Seattle. Now, with the Los Angeles Rams, they're reigning division champs. They went through their bout of injuries last year, and then they turned it on as the year progressed. And I think with as good of a front seven as they have, there's names everywhere, whether it's Kobe Turner, Byron Young, Jared Verse, Braden Fisk, and the list goes on. They're always going to be a tough team because at minimum they can get after the quarterback and they can kind of control the game through the trenches with a lot of teams. So the Rams are going to be another really good team this year, and they are also a really good team offensively as well, whether it's Kyron Williams, whether it's the new Ram, Devontae Adams, and of course Puka Nacua, who is, to me, one of the best receivers in football. They're one of the better teams. And I like I said earlier, I do think they will win the NFC West. But top to bottom, no matter what your order is, this is one of the most complete divisions in all of football.
So, Garrett, I got a couple questions for you that kind of pertain to the division in itself. But how much of a addition, or how much of an impact, I should say, will Robert Saleh be on that 49ers defense? Obviously, he's now come back, and when he was there, he was definitely one of the best defensive coordinators in football. And then the impact of Cooper Kupp, is he going to have more of an impact being in Seattle, or is it going to be more of a negative impact that he left the Rams for them in their offense going forward here?
So Robert Saleh going back to San Francisco, I feel like is going to be huge. Maybe not for, they finished 29th in points allowed per game last year. I don't know if it's going to go from 29 to, 2 or 3 per se, but I really think just in terms of, laying the foundation for San Francisco over the next couple of years with how they want their defense to play as we go from the mid to the late 2020s, he's going to have a huge part in that, because I don't think Kyle Shanahan's going to go anywhere anytime soon. At least, not like from a fired standpoint. If he retires or just does something else, that's a different discussion. But Robert Saleh is a really good defensive coordinator. And a lot of the time you hear, he's a good coordinator. He's not a good head coach. That's not necessarily a bad thing, because there's a lot that goes into being an NFL coordinator. And I think Robert Saleh is kind of the textbook example of that. Now with Cooper Kupp, he will probably, if I had to guess, I think he would be a little more limited for Seattle from a statute standpoint, just because there were times last year and week 1 against the Lions was a good example where he had, I want to say 21 targets. I might be off a little bit on that, but he would have games where he'd have, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20 targets, and he'd put up those ridiculous stat lines that he did. And I don't think that's really realistic for Cooper Kupp at this point in his career, especially in this offense of all teams. That would require a game where Jackson Smith-Njigba doesn't get fed the ball. That would require a game where K9 and Charbonnet don't really get fed as much. And anytime you have a player, get 18, 19 targets, when you're only running maybe 60, 65, maybe 70 offensive plays for that specific player at this point in his career, I would be a little surprised. But that doesn't mean he's going to be bad. Cooper Kupp is still a talented football player. There's a reason he received the contract that he did. And like I said, the stats might not be there, but he's still going to be good. He's still going to be impact. And when it's 3rd and 7, hell or high water, I wouldn't be surprised if he's the guy that they lean on more often than not.
Yeah, awesome stuff, Garrett. This has been an awesome conversation with you, man. Time's flying. We've had you on for about 40 minutes here, but yeah, awesome breakdown, man. This was just a fun conversation. I want to let you kind of talk about your channel and let everyone know that's watching our channel here. You've had some pretty big success with your channel, so a lot of people might be watching, not sure about that, but you got the plaque on the wall back there. Talk about some of your success with your channel, how long you've been running the channel, and at the end also how can people jump on and subscribe to your channel as well.
Yeah, so when I first started the channel, I was in college, and I kind of just said to myself, whether it was a channel that had 500 subscribers or 50,000, whatever that number is, they had to start somewhere. And even Mr. Beast had to start at 0 subscribers at one point, right? So it was more of like, okay, let's just give this a shot and see what happens. And I'm very much obviously I'm well, not obviously because you can't see, but I'm 5'10", 5'11", $170. I'm not DK Metcalf where I'm 6'4", 230. I'm not athletically gifted like that. So you have that conversation. It's like, okay, I'm not going to be a professional athlete, but I can live with myself if I give everything that I have in another aspect of life and it doesn't work out. And that was kind of what I had with the YouTube channel. It was 2019 when I really committed. I was like, all right, we're going to do 3 videos a week. Whatever happens, happens. And I'm going to give it 3 years. And fortunately it worked out. But there's so much trial and error with YouTube, with business, with everything. That's just kind of the reality of life, is that there's going to be so much trial and error with everything. And then that's kind of how we got here. Just keep chugging, keep working, keep, trust in the process itself. And that's ultimately how we got to where we are today. So appreciate you guys having me on, and you guys can find my work at Football Analysis, and there's going to be a lot of NFL content, a lot of differentiating NFL content throughout the summer, and then we'll eventually get into team previews around the late June area.
Awesome stuff, man. Yeah, no, that's awesome story, inspirational, and yeah, man, just congrats on your success. So guys, make sure you go over and sub to Garrett's channel. Links will be in the description here. But yeah, Garrett, we appreciate it again, man. Love your grade. We're pumped as Seahawks fans. We just can't wait for the season to get going, and yeah, just excited for the future here. So yeah, man, appreciate it again, and would love to talk to you in the future here.
Absolutely. Thank you guys for having me.
Thanks, Garrett. Guys, that was Garrett Greenley from Football Analysis. You guys heard his story about how he's got his channel off the ground from 0 to almost 200,000 subscribers, guys. Like that is a huge milestone. And you know what? He knows his football. I mean, he breaks down all the teams in the NFL, and he came in and he's broken down every team and and all their drafts. And he is high on the Hawks, A+ grade, only 3 teams that he gave that grade to. Bryce, I know you and I came in with our grades and we were around the A- level. But to hear him come in with an A+ grade is huge.
Yeah, it really is. It really speaks to the fact that a lot of, people outside of the Seattle area view this draft class, with high regard, and that John Schneider and Mike McDonald really did potentially hit this out of the park. Now, again, we still have to see the product on the field. There could be a lot of duds in this class, but based off of what we have seen from their college to how they could fit in this system, there's a lot of optimism around this draft class, and it's cool to hear someone else who doesn't have ties to Seattle really be the one to say it as well.
Yeah, doesn't have ties, but knows football and knows the team inside and out, which is so huge. Sometimes guys will say, "Oh, I like the team. I got no outsider perspectives." This guy really dives into each team, so it's awesome here. And then when we talked about division, he thinks it's going to be a tough division. You and I kind of talked on that. We've had a couple of guys on him, and everyone thinks, look, the team like the Cardinals, Gannon, guys are playing hard for him. They're going to be a tough team, and they have been a tough team. And then the Niners, like he says, it's people think it's as simple as Brock got paid, they're going to suck. You still got pieces in place. You brought up Salah now on the other side of that ball. Just like we're confident in our staff with Mike as a head coach, defensive guru, and now Clint Kubiak on that side. So, when you have those pieces in place and you look at this team, and that kind of, we talk about how things start from the top. You look at every organization in this division, from starting to the top, right? Like you look at some of these coaches, look at the head coaches in this division. Even Gannon's got things going on, but McVay and then Shanahan and now, our own guy, Mike McDonald. I mean, there is some smart minds in this division. And so there's no wonder he's high on this division, and it's going to be a tough one.
Yeah, I honestly think that, and this is my bold take right now in May, it may change, but my honest take is I think every single one of these NFC West teams will be 2 games over 500. I think that the lowest, win percentage or win total will be 9 for one of these teams. Like the 4th place team will have 9 wins, unless barring some miraculous and crazy injuries occurring. This whole division has gotten better, and this whole division and teams that maybe we talk about the Seahawks, and like we talked with Garrett about how much they've closed the gap with their class and stuff like that. But then we talk about the 49ers, you listen to Garrett say people think because Brock Purdy got paid that they're going to all of a sudden be horrible.
Yeah.
They still have players there that are good level players. So to be honest, man, I could see 3 to 4 teams, especially 3 making the playoffs out of this division this year.
Yeah, no, it wouldn't surprise me either, man. So look, awesome conversation tonight. Guys, Garrett Greenley, go over and sub to his channel, Football Analysis. The link will be in the description. So go over there, check out his stuff, because he's just got a lot of great insight and an awesome channel, and it shows with the amount of people that are that have went over there already and subscribed. So awesome episode, guys. Make sure you go over and do the same for our channel. Go down, subscribe, like and share the videos, and also hit the bell so you know when future episodes are coming, like this one tonight. You wouldn't want to miss this with Garrett Greenley. So and also we're over on fieldgoals.com, guys, as you know. So go over there and check that out, because we are over there, the official podcast of Field Goals, and they also have some amazing writers over there as well. Bryce, any closing thoughts before we get out of here?
Yeah, guys. Also, don't forget, become a member of our channel. There's a membership program. Make sure you guys join that. It'll give you some special access to different things that will be going on. And guys, honestly, you know what? We've got Corbin Smith coming up on our next episode, which is going to be a lot of fun. Corbin's a great guest, and we're going to ask him what he's seen out at OTAs and such going forward, because OTAs have just kicked off here yesterday. So it's exciting times. Seahawks football is getting closer.
Yeah, good stuff. Yeah, it's going to happen in a blink of an eye, and we're going to be back on the field in no time. So, guys, that's it for us tonight. Go Hawks.
Go Hawks.